going to start with the petals, and for the most part we're going to leave the petals white. We're going to leave the paper as it is, but we have to add a little bit of shadow to the corner areas just to show a little bit of folds and so that the flower looks natural. We're going to start with creating a shadow mix. Here I'm mixing Cobalt Blue, Burnt Sienna and Crimson Lake to create a nice shadow color. Once you've prepared the shadow color, make sure you add a lot of water to it because we don't want the shadow color to be too dark, alright? So we want a very light tinge, so make sure you apply water and test the color so that you're happy with it. You want to make sure that you also have another source of clean water. For this it is very important, guys, because when you're doing white flowers and you want to do wet and wet to start, we have to make sure when we wet the petal it has to be clean. So here I'm going to dip my brush in clean water and then I'm going to go over the petal. Actually, it's best if you keep another round brush for this, especially just for the clean water. So here I'm going to apply a layer of clean water all over the petal. Alright, now my petal is nice and wet. We're going to start applying the shadow color. I'm going to apply a light tinge. You can see how beautifully it's spreading, and I can control my watercolor pretty well. You can see it's not spreading too much. If you are still not confident about how to do that, make sure you watch my how to control your watercolor video. So now the shadow color is done. Now towards the bud we're going to apply Crimson Lake. You can apply any pink shade, and we're going to do the same technique that we did for the shadow. It's very important that at this point, whenever you're painting any of the petals, you have to make sure that there's a white untouched part between the shadow and the pink close to the bud. That is how we're going to give that effect of a white flower. Do not try to mix or cover the entire petal with the shadow and the pink, otherwise our white will be gone. So that effect of white is not going to remain anymore. Okay, so I'm happy with this petal and I'm going to repeat the same process. I'm going to alternate petals so that, one petal dries completely and we don't mess around with the other one. So here I've changed my water again and I'm keeping another round brush just for applying that wet wash. As you can see, I'm going to repeat the same thing that I did for the first petal. I'm going to apply shadow to the top part and near the folds, and towards the center of the bud I'm going to apply a little bit of Crimson Lake. And we basically have to finish the entire flower doing the same thing. And don't worry about it if you think it's too dark. Watercolor dries 1 or 2 shades lighter. So once this is going to be fully dry, it's going to be way light, and then we can do a second layer. Once our base is done, we are going to apply a darker shade of that same shadow color to the folds. Alright, so our first layer is dry and now we're going to start with the second and the most fun part is painting the veins. But before you do that, I want to point out a very common mistake that everybody does. So you can see that the veins are following the curve and the direction of the petal's contour. Okay, this is the way you're supposed to do it. What you don't want to do is just make straight lines, because that is completely unnatural and looks really weird and people don't realize they're doing this. So what we're going to do, we're going to follow the contour of the petal. You can see here it's going straight and then it's following the curve outward to each direction. We're not making straight lines. So that is how you're going to achieve a very natural petal. So I'm going to use my rigger brush, or you can use the thinnest round brush you have with the fine point. I'm going to use that same Scarlet Lake. And when you're using a rigger brush, you want to make sure that the consistency of the paint is like ink. If it is too thick, you will not be able to achieve that line. So you can see I'm just flicking it out. And a very important thing at this point is from the bud, it's supposed to be thick to thin. You can see that the way I'm flicking my brush, the stroke is coming from thick to thin, and that is the most natural way of painting veins. So here you pretty much have to do this on your own, because of course you can't replicate everything I'm doing. But one thing, this is very easy. You don't have to join the entire petal. You can break the veins in between. So now when I'm going to paint from the top part of the petal towards the bud, I'm going to turn my sheet, and it enables me to do this more easily. And again, when I flick now, it's going to be from thick to thin, and that is what we want to achieve. If you would paint this without turning the page, you might achieve a thin to thick technique, and that will not look good. So please feel free to move around your paper block as often as you want to. I do that. I myself turn around all over the table. I keep turning my block, and you can do it to make it more easy for you. Alright, so I'm gonna try not to overdo it because we artists really have that problem of not knowing when to stop. So now I'm gonna follow the same technique in all the other petals. Now we're going to separate the petals a little bit by adding the same pink shade towards the base of each petal, so that there's a difference visually. Now we're going to start painting the background. Now if you want an easier alternative to do the background, I'm adding this clip for you. You can draw in such a way where the petals would touch the corner. So we'll do the background in 3 parts. We'll finish the top left, the bottom, and then the top right. So you'll have all the time to finish your background. Here, as you can see in the main drawing, the petals are not touching the corner, so we have to finish the entire background in one go. So if you want an easier alternative, you could draw your flower like that. I'm going to start with Indian yellow. You can use pretty much any yellow that you have. What we're going to do is put a basic wash of yellow on our background, so that when we paint green after that, the yellow is going to show through and our background is going to glow. So here you don't have to be perfect with it. You just have to put a layer of yellow, but just make sure that when you reach the corners of the petals, try not to breach the line. Okay, just make sure that you do the outline slowly. Even if it breaches a little bit, that's okay, because when we do the dark green, we're going to cover up and we'll correct any of our mistakes. Now we're going to use the same yellow in the center of the bud. Now while the bud is still wet, we're going to apply a dark shade of Crimson Lake and Burnt Sienna towards the outer part of the bud. And the paint needs to be very thick, okay guys, and it needs to flow into the bud. So you have to control your watercolor here again. Make sure that there is less water on the paper, less water in your brush, and more paint. So here I'm not going to cover the bud completely, just to define that circle in the bud. With that same thin rigger brush, I'm going to start applying small dots in the center of the bud. Add a little bit burnt sienna and cobalt blue to that same mix to create a very dark shade, and try to corner the circle again. Now, once our background is completely dry, we're going to start the second step by applying green on top. Now, why did I apply yellow to begin with? We want the background to glow, okay? Now, because green is a transparent color, when we apply green on top of yellow, the yellow is going to show through and is going to give more body to our background. So, if you would have just painted green on top of white, it would have looked a little dull, and we might would have considered to apply more layers, just because it would have felt like something's missing. But if you underpaint the background yellow and then apply green on top of it, it's going to look beautiful, it's going to have more body, and it's going to glow. So here I'm going to quickly work wet and wet. I want to keep applying water to the left and to the right part so that it doesn't dry. If you have an air conditioner or a fan running in your room, you might want to consider switching that off, because we want the drying time to be as slow as possible. So here the key is to work as quickly, and also make sure that you don't ruin the corners of the bud. If you're painting the easier alternative that I showed you, then you have all the time in the world to finish one section at a time. So yes, that would be easier, but here I just thought that so far you would have become pretty advanced following my course, so you won't have a problem. So if you can see here, I'm not using one tone of green for the entire background. I'm making it light in certain areas, I'm making it dark in certain areas. You want to try making it more dark towards the petal, where it touches the petal, so that the petal stands out more against the dark color. I'm using small circular motions to create that soft blurry effect. I think if you guys follow me by now, you know that I don't use straight strokes. I prefer using small circular motions for mostly everything, I think. And you can see here that towards the bud I'm using a thicker mix so that there is a nice contrast happening. So I'm going to finish the background here, and you want to make sure that you don't let it dry out. So if you're working on the right side, be mindful of the left area, and if you think it's drying, before that apply a little bit of water so that you keep the drying time slow. The top half of the painting would be darker, and the lower half, bottom half, would be lighter, because we're going to have leaves in the bottom half and we want the leaves to stand out against the light background. So I'm intentionally keeping the top part dark and the light part lighter. can see I'm almost done with my background and I'm so happy with the way it's looking. It's looking so beautiful, it's looking so 3D, so lifelike. And yeah, I think you can achieve this too. Now our background is in the process of drying, and till then I'm going to use Crimson Lake to outline this dark shadow area of the petal so that there's a separation happening. We're also going to apply veins to the folded dark part of the petal, so make sure that you keep in mind that direction of veins that I told you about. Alright, now we're going to start painting the leaves, which is pretty simple. Make sure that your background is completely dry, and towards the bottom you can see where the light area is. I am just going to use my round brush and stroke it upwards. I'm putting more pressure, pressing the round brush more towards the bottom and lifting it towards the top. So I'm automatically getting a thin to a thick line. You can also do this from top to bottom. Apply more pressure when you come down. Alright, so you can make as many leaves as you want to, and try to make it in different directions. You don't want the leaves to be like, cactus lines on top. Alright, you don't want a vertical line. Keep the movement flowing. Some leaves are going left, some are going right, some are going straight, some are thin, some are thick. So apply a lot of variety, but then again, don't overdo it. Alright guys, so our painting is done. It's looking amazing, it's so beautiful, and it's actually pretty easy to make. So if you happen to try this painting, please send me a work on Instagram. I'll be more than happy to give you constructive feedback, and I would just be very happy to see your work. Alright, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye bye guys.